Hello and welcome to the Ann Phelim Scoop. I'm 𝙈𝙤𝙘 𝙈𝙘𝙀𝙀. It's week 73. That's 1 year, 5 months and 1 week since the 2 weeks to flatten the curve lockdown, when the government told us it would just be 2 weeks. So we're heading to a year and a half now. And it is actually 2 months and 1 week since Hunter Biden was revealed that Hunter Biden used the N-word, and the mainstream media has failed to report it. Shocking. As you may notice, this is the Ann Phelim Scoop without the Ann. Ann is currently travelling to satisfy the dumbest COVID restrictions ever. More about that later. And I'm going to join her. Does that make me a bigger fool? Lots of media reaction to our 𝙈𝙘𝙇𝙊𝙾 announcement. 𝙈𝙘𝙇 is going to be the director of our and your My Son Hunter movement. Movement. It is a movement. So we'll be looking at that. And just when you thought it couldn't get any worse, we have truly stunning Planned Parenthood selling baby parts news. You know, and when you're involved in the business of baby parts and you're involved, it's a business. And when one public not-for-profit is dealing with another not-for-profit, they always have diversity issues. So how do you get diversity into selling baby parts? Yes, they've done it. So we'll be interviewing David Daleiden later on to hear the latest on this stunning. I just can't. What country are we living in? What world are we living in? And we have a hilarious COVID rule story from Ireland. Well, it would be hilarious if it wasn't for how it illustrates just what they really think about us. And we don't have a cookery section at the moment, but I thought I'd bring you up to date on the latest on that very important part of cookery, the dishwasher. So there's a war. The elites are declaring war on dishwashers. Of course they are, because their mates do all the housework and screw the rest of us. We'll be talking about that, the war on dishwashers. So first of all, let's go over now. Well, actually, let me tell you about 𝙈𝙘𝙇. So as you remember last week, we announced 𝙈𝙘𝙇 is going to be the director of the My Son Hunter movie. I have been talking to Robert 2, 3 times, 4 times a day since then. He's very excited. We're really looking at the script now and trying to make it brilliant, make it pop. I think we said that to him. This is not going to be your grandmother's conservative movie. This is going to be a real movie with. I mean, Hunter Biden is a story that just keeps on giving. It is, in terms of a story, it's got everything. It's got sex and drugs and rock and roll and debauchery and corruption and media malfeasance and exotic locations like the Ukraine, like Monte Carlo, like Russia, like China, like a strip bar in Los Angeles, like the Chateau Marmont Hotel. I mean, you know, funny, the elites, they do like their nice places, you know, even the corrupt ones, especially the corrupt ones. That's what the money's for. So we've been working really hard. We're going to bring you a brilliant script, and we want to thank you for all the help that you've given. We could not have made this movie without you. We're going ahead. We're going to start filming mid to late October in Serbia. If anyone's in Serbia, I know we have a few Serbian listeners. If anyone is in Serbia at the end of October, beginning of November, please call on the set. Declare yourself a listener to the Ann Phelim Scoop. You will be treated like a VIP. So we're going to be filming then. We've got 𝙈𝙘𝙇. We're going to be making some very interesting cast announcements soon. So to help us make this movie, we still need your help. You've been very good. You've raised over $1 million. Like, imagine $1 million in small donations. It's been amazing. So please, if you've given already, give again. Go to mysonhunter.com. Please give again. I know you may be listening thinking, I must do that. Please, this is the time to do it. If you haven't given and you're listening to this free podcast, think about you know, paying a little subscription to the podcast. Just give a little to the My Son Hunter movie. So go to mysonhunter.com. This is the story that the liberal media won't tell. This is the story the mainstream media won't tell. This is the story Hollywood won't tell. But we're going to tell it, and we're going to make people laugh, and they're going to hate that because they don't like it when we have fun. So let's have some fun. mysonhunter.com. So David teamed up. You know, David is the person who did the undercover Planned Parenthood videos. So David teamed up with Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch, and they did a massive Freedom of Information request. And it is truly shocking what they've gotten. So they got emails from the University of Pittsburg buying baby parts. Only liberals could do this. Only liberals could do that. And only Liberals then could put a racial quota on it. They want a certain number of black babies and a certain number of white babies and a certain number of Asian babies. I'll let David tell the story. It is truly shocking, and David deserves Pulitzer Prize after Pulitzer Prize for this. But of course he won't, because that's only given to people who confirm the narrative rather than disrupt it. Let's go to that interview that we did earlier. Thanks. Hello, and I'm joined by our very good friend, David Daleiden, from the director of the Centre for Medical Progress. David should have a regular gig on our show, basically, because he's one of the greatest living journalists in America today. He's really breaking story after story and important stories. The story about university, so much of what David has broken in the past is hard to believe is going on in 21st century America. You remember David was the person behind the Planned Parenthood video sting, where Planned Parenthood openly discussed profiting from the selling of baby parts, baby skin, baby organs, baby legs, baby arms, and there was a price and there was an invoice. It's truly shocking stuff. You teamed up with Tom Fitton from Judicial Watch and used his freedom of information skills to demand freedom of letters and communications from the University of Pittsburg. Just tell the people what you initially found. What was in those initial emails and letters that it just beggars belief.
So over a year ago, Center for Medical Progress submitted a FOIA request to the National Institutes of Health asking for the original grant applications for a program at the University of Pittsburgh that was called the GoodMap Project. That's the genitourinary development mapping project, where they are trying to get a full record and a full collection of late-term aborted fetal kidneys and bladders and other organs for distribution all across the country to NIH researchers, taxpayer-funded researchers all across the country. And in the original grant applications that were produced by the NIH, finally in response to this FOIA request, after delaying for about a year, which is why we had to get Judicial Watch involved to make sure they produced them. In these grant applications, they read like an episode of American Horror Story. The grant applications...
Just let me interrupt you there, David. So these are grant applications from the University of Pittsburgh to the National Institute of Health. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this is what the University of Pittsburgh is going to do for the National Institute of Health. Yeah.
Yes.
So they're going to get these baby parts and then distribute them to other researchers. Was that the plan?
Yes, that's correct. The grant application is titled, the title of the program is to have a, quote, tissue distribution hub at the University of Pittsburgh for aborted baby kidneys and bladders and other organs. And they describe from the very beginning of the application, they say Pitt will be the best place to do this because we have been harvesting baby parts for so long, since 2005. And they say that their collections could be significantly ramped up.
So that's the grant application. So tell us more about the grant application.
Sure. So throughout the rest of the grant application, Pitt is basically advertising to NIH why they're going to be the best place to have this massive harvesting hub for baby body parts. And one of the points that they advertise very prominently to the NIH is they say that ischemia time will be minimized when the University of Pittsburgh is harvesting baby parts. Now, ischemia time, according to the National Institutes of Health, and according to the basic medical definition, ischemia means the time when blood supply is lost to an organ. And what the University of Pittsburgh very clearly says is they say that they record the warm ischemic time of all of the body parts that they harvest, and they take affirmative steps to make sure that they minimize the ischemia time, the time between the blood supply is lost and the time when it's supplied to the researcher. And they do that based on, they do that in order to maximize the needs of the final users and experimenters with the body parts. Pitt made this even more intense just a couple of days ago when they were asked what they meant in the application by this by news media. And Pitt, in their statements in news media, is actually saying that the ischemia, the loss of blood supply, does not happen until after the body parts have been harvested. So let me repeat that, make that really clear. Ischemia means when blood supply is lost to the organs, when there's no longer circulation of blood to the fetal organs.
When there's a death.
And it is saying that the kidneys do not lose circulation until they've cut them out of the fetuses.
So they're cutting babies open alive, and they're harvesting baby
that
parts.
means that there's circulation. That means that there's a heartbeat before they harvest the kidneys from the babies. And this is especially disturbing because also in the grant application, Pitt lists labor induction abortion, where they just induce labor in the patient and the baby is just pushed out of her. They list labor induction abortion as a, quote, tissue collection method that they're going to use in this NIH-funded program.
So that's basically what 𝙎𝙤𝙤 𝙃𝙪𝙣 was doing, by the way.
That's exactly what 𝙎𝙤𝙃 was doing.
He was inducing labor. He was then doing a different thing. He was then killing the babies. But inducing labor is a no-fuss way of aborting babies. Actually, it's a great way of doing it. And if you're in that business, and then it's a great way to harvest body parts. I mean, and that's not, they talk about tissue. Well, when they say tissue, they mean body parts. They mean kidneys, they mean livers, they mean skin, they mean fingers.
Sometimes they mean the whole baby.
Sometimes they mean the whole baby. Yeah, that's what they call tissue. I've seen those invoices, and they're amazing invoices. The banality of evil. So yeah, the baby is born alive. They make sure then that the baby is kept alive whilst it's harvested. So to make sure, as they say, that the end user has complete satisfaction, because you wouldn't want to upset the customer, because the customer is always right. And this also means, by the way, this breaks the law in so many ways, apart from profiting from baby parts. This breaks the law because it also means that they're changing their medical process for profit. So abortion is legal in most states. Doctors make clinical decisions about how to do an abortion for the least harm to the woman, I assume. But if there's a profit motive involved, and they say, well, actually, to supply the end user, as they call it, with the organs, with the tissue, we need to do it this way. That is putting the woman's safety at risk, so that they can profit. They're actually changing them. Isn't that correct?
Definitely. It's very clear in the grant application that Pitt is making decisions about how they abort these infants based on what is going to get them, the most usable body parts for their NIH grant money. It's flagrantly against the NIH rules and the federal statutes that govern that kind of experimentation. It's incredible that nobody at the NIH apparently noticed that or called it into question, either during the initial grant application process or in the 5 years after that when it's been renewed.
When was this? When was this initial grant application?
So they submitted the grant application at the end of 2015. They were approved in the middle of 2016. In late 2016 is when they started getting their funding, and it continued all throughout the Trump administration.
All through the Trump administration.
Continued up through this year.
Yeah, look, if anybody ever tells you there's no deep state in this country, there's a deep state. There's an administrative state who don't care about what the electorate said or what the electorate want. They're going to push progressivism until they are sick and until it kills us all. I mean, without doubt, the President Trump and Mike Pence were elected as the most pro-life administration in decades, if not ever. I mean, that's a fact, whether you like it or not. That's what they were. At the same time, their National Institute of Health is organizing the harvesting of baby parts from aborted babies. I mean, you are deep state. You're super deep state level at that stage.
Yeah, there's the biggest deep state may in fact be at the Health and Human Services Department and at the National Institutes of Health. I mean, this is perhaps the biggest government bureaucracy almost $1 trillion budget. I mean, there are people, people who work at HHS will tell you nobody at HHS really knows everything that's going on there. I mean, that's that's part of the problem. It's a completely unaccountable runaway federal bureaucracy, and so it's been involved in these Frankenstein-like experiments for decades now. Speaking of the runaway progressivism, I mean, this isn't even the establishment media's modern woke progressivism going on in this grant. The grant also specifically notes that Pitt is going to target Black and brown women and babies for harvesting, target them with racial quotas, that they have a specific number of Black babies and Black women and brown babies and brown women and Asian women and Asian babies that need to be harvested for this program. They want a full 50% of the women and fetuses to be minorities, and only 50% to be white. Now, Allegheny County, which is the major metropolitan area where Pittsburgh is located, which is where where all the abortion patients are going to be coming from, is 80% white and only 14% Black. So this is, and we actually drew attention to this in our amicus curiae brief to the Supreme Court. The burdens of fetal experimentation and fetal trafficking majorly disproportionately impact minority communities. And this is something that Pitt is proud of.
Apart from being sick and grotesque and Frankenstein, right? So if you're a woman who goes into an abortion clinic and is uncertain, and you're talking to the person who's supposed to inform you of what the process is and allow you to drop out, do you think, and if they have a quota to meet, and it's 13% Black in their area, and they need 50% of the babies to be harvested to be from people of color, and they look at a person of color, do you think they're going to say, well, you have doubts, maybe you should come back another day, maybe you should go home and talk to your parents, maybe you should go home, talk to your boyfriend, your husband? They could say that. Do you think they're going to say that? Or do you think they're going to say, we need to hit our quota? We need to keep the lights on here. We need to keep my salary and my 501k.
It's a completely disgusting and depraved idea that there should ever be abortion quotas. How about there be a quota for a taxpayer-funded project at the University of Pittsburgh? How many Black women and minority women can we make sure that they have the resources they need in order to feel like they don't have to abort their babies and they can carry to term, and they can provide for those children? Like, wouldn't that be a better quota? Like, how absolutely perverse that there would be a quota for how many poor and vulnerable people we need to make sure they get their abortions for our commercial and experimental use. It's absolutely disgusting.
Okay.
And anyone who knew about this at the NIH or the Department of Justice or the White House over the past several years, anyone who knew about this and did nothing should be totally ashamed of themselves. Yes. And it's absolutely mind-boggling that we're only finding out about this now.
Okay, let's be fair. Let's hear how are the University of Pittsburgh defending themselves, and how are the National Institute of Health defending themselves?
Yeah, so the National Institute of Health has not said a word about this. The University of Pittsburgh is actually defending their targeting of racial minorities with this grant. They're literally saying, well, because minority communities have more illness, and because this race is sicker, that means we need to abort more of their babies in order to do experiments on them. So they're basically just going full Nazi on that one. And then as far as the ischemia time of the body parts and the harvesting from fetuses that still have a heartbeat and circulation, Pitt isn't denying that whatsoever. They came out and they intensified it in their statements to media, and they are saying straight up on the record, ischemia doesn't happen until after we've cut the kidneys out of the baby. So there needs to be, I saw the U.S. Senate candidate for Pennsylvania, Sean Parnell, just yesterday called for a full investigation of the University of Pittsburgh. People need to be fired. They should be totally defunded. And anybody involved in this should be charged and prosecuted criminally.
Yeah, I mean, it is illegal to profit from baby parts in the United States, apparently, allegedly. So, David, this is supposed to be a short interview, but actually it just ended up, the story is just so compelling that I just wanted to, I also wanted people to understand in detail what's going on, because the detail is the big picture is horrifying, the detail is horrifying, and I wanted to be fair, and I wanted people to know what's going on in their name in America today. and what the administration seems to be okay with that. But thank you very much, David, for coming on the show. I'd love to say, hopefully we won't have you on again because we won't have any more of these stories to report, but you're doing a great job. You're revealing tragedies and scandals that boggle the mind. So please keep up the good work, and let's have you on again.
Definitely. Thank you.
What kind of country, as I say, what kind of country are we living in? Thanks that was an amazing interview. It's shocking that this is going on in this country. There's going to have to be an inquiry. There's going to have to be heads will have to roll. This cannot go on. And this is who's in government now. People who think that's okay. So on a lighter note, let's go over to Ireland, actually, to an interview I did earlier with John McGuirk from Gript.Ie. So John is one of the few journalists still working in Ireland who actually tells the truth and tells the stories. It's a really funny, in some respects, COVID rule story about how, by the way, the elites, what's really struck me was the elites are exactly the same and do exactly the same all over the world. As Anne said, you go to Indonesia now and you have the elites saying the exact same nonsense as the elites in Berkeley, right? There's no, in fact, they say they hate globalization, but it's the globalization of stupidity, actually. And it's the globalization, and the elites have their own globalized. So we had our glorious leader here in California, Gavin Newsom, in the French Laundry, which is the most expensive restaurant probably in Northern California. Let's go over to John now, the interview we did earlier, and hear about Ireland's French Laundry. Welcome to the show, John McGuirk. John is the editor of Gript.Ie, has been at the forefront of many's a cultural battle in Ireland, and we've had him on the show before. I just really wanted the reason I have you on today, John, is because Anne talks about this before, the globalization of stupidity. For people who are so opposed to globalization, progressives, they all think the same. The progressive in Indonesia has the same script as a progressive in San Francisco, and they all behave the same as well. Mm-hmm. And it's like a joke. It's like they're behaving exactly the same. So here in California, here in America, the most egregious example of COVID hypocrisy and making it up as you go along, and what's right for you is not right for me because I'm important, was Governor Gavin Newsom, the French Laundry, which is, I think it's the most expensive restaurant in California, could be certainly the most expensive restaurant in Northern California. And let me tell you, that's an expensive restaurant, the French Laundry. He was indoors. He wasn't wearing a mask. He was with people who weren't members of his family. And Nancy Pelosi was the same, if you get heard of. But then it turns out we have an Irish Gavin Newsom, but I think almost to a T, the exact same story. So the person's name is Catherine Zapponi, who is actually an American as well. But first of all, welcome to the show, John. Actually, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Phelim, for having me. And you're quite correct in that right around the world, since lockdowns have been imposed, we have seen this situation where, on the one hand, ordinary people are expected to obey the rules, and in many cases, prosecuted for not obeying the rules. Whereas people who are actually making the rules very regularly decide that they're optional. And you mentioned the case of Gavin Newsom in California, where you guys are familiar. And back in Ireland, it's the exact same thing. We've had this week a situation where the Deputy Prime Minister, the Deputy Taoiseach Leo Varadkar, was in the Merrion Hotel, which is Ireland's version of the French Laundry. It's comfortably the most expensive hotel on the island, yucking it up with 50 very well-to-do people from all strands of journalism, politics, NGOs, so on and so forth, at a party being hosted on behalf of Catherine Zapponi, who is an ex-Irish government minister, an American citizen who spent some time here, and was hosting a party, a kind of a retirement party, we believed, because she was leaving Ireland and going back to the US. And of course, what then made it even more of a scandal was that because she was leaving Ireland and going back to the US, the government of the day decided to give her a present on the way out by making her the Irish envoy for free speech at the United Nations. This is a woman who, incidentally, doesn't believe in free speech and has consistently advocated for hate speech laws. So, I mean, this is a situation now where it's gotten to the point where it's quite funny, because Mr. Varadkar clearly broke the rules. The Deputy Prime Minister, or Taoiseach as we call him in Ireland, clearly broke the rules. So the government has now had to retroactively change the rules to say that he did not, in fact, break the rules. And that's where we're at now.
Yeah. So Catherine, I want to just explain who Catherine Zapponi is. She's an American progressive, so therefore loved by the Irish elites. She is a lesbian. She taught theology as well. You know, she has this. Am I confusing? She taught theology. She's a professor, lecturer type, but you know,
she came to prominence in Ireland. Phelim, how she came to prominence in Ireland was that she moved here with her late wife, Anne Marie Gilligan.
Mm-hmm.
And in conjunction with her, she sued the Irish state in 2013 so that her marriage would be recognised in Ireland, which at that time did not have gay marriage. And that won her a lot of plaudits and appreciation from progressive activists in Ireland. And from there, her career took off. She lost that court case, as it turns out, but she was then at the forefront of the campaign to legalise gay marriage in Ireland. So that is where she came from. That's her background.
Well, actually, let's break it down how it happened. It was just suddenly announced after a cabinet meeting that she was getting this nice job with the UN as a free speech advocate or envoy. Now, this is a woman, as you say, who's advocated for hate speech laws, who's probably advocated for not letting people protest outside abortion clinics, who wants to shut down any kind of speech that she doesn't agree with. That's her definition of free speech. That is, but by the way, that fits in perfectly with the UN, where where Saudi Arabia is on the Human Rights Commission. So nothing wrong there. Now they were saying, it's only 15,000 a year. Well, like, nice job. By the way, unlimited expenses.
Well, the first thing to say there, Phelim, is that 15,000 a year is 3,000 more than what the Irish state pays people for an old age pension. The old age pension in Ireland is about 12,500 a year if you're just getting the basic state pension, which most people do. So, I mean, we then had that compounded by a government minister going on the television and saying, I don't know what the big deal is. It's only 15,000 euros.
Yeah.
And of course, UN positions generally have expenses regimes that include, for example, a per diem. For those people who don't know what a per diem is, that is just a fixed rate of expenses that you get every single day. I don't know what it is specifically for that position, but in the diplomatic corps, where we're talking this position being in that area, I mean, €200-300 or $200-300 a day is not uncommon on top of the salary.
Nice work if you can get it.
And tax-free.
And let's be clear, this was not advertised. This was not, no one had heard of the job before. No one knew the job existed.
The job didn't exist, Phelim. And this is a key part of the story. The job did not exist. It has transpired that actually she was leaving Ireland. She was selling her home in Ireland. She was moving to New York. And she called up the Minister for Foreign Affairs and said, I'm going to be in New York anyway. Wouldn't it be great if we had an envoy for free speech? Wow. Wouldn't that be a good position to create? So then the minister said, well, certainly, Catherine, we could do that. So he created the position for her and appointed it to her without advertising it. So there was no question of advertising the position because the position did not exist and has never existed. Ireland has never previously had an envoy for free speech to the United Nations.
Well, do you have that number there? Because I'm based in Los Angeles, right? And wouldn't it be great if we had an envoy for conservative filmmaking? Religion. Ireland is our conservatives in Ireland. I think Ireland needs an envoy for even filmmaking, actually.
Gaelic football, sport, pick up anything. Drinking Guinness, Phelim. I think, would you be good at that?
My days are behind me, unfortunately. That I peaked too early on that one. very much so, in fact. Yes.
But you're quite correct in the principle, in that what caused the outrage was that this is not something that the average citizen can do. I mean, I've been knocking around Ireland for a while. I know some people in politics, but I don't think I could ring them up and say, could you create me a UN envoy and give me a job and a sinecure and an expenses account? So to move the story on a little bit, we'd had this situation where the job had been created for her. Now, how does this bring it back to COVID regulations? Well, it transpired about a week after the story had broken. There was no sign of her resigning or anyone saying it. I mean, the fact that the Taoiseach/Prime Minister came out and said it was a mistake, but we move on. It then transpired that a few days before she was appointed to the job, she had hosted this farewell dinner for 50 of her closest friends and companions in the most expensive hotel in Ireland, in complete contravention of what the government said that guidelines were. So you weren't supposed to have indoor gatherings of, I think, more than 10 people. So she'd hosted this event exclusively. And
this was an outdoor gathering, she says, right? Yes.
Well, if I don't know if you can put your mind to it, I've been to the Marion Hotel several times, so there's no such thing. There is an outdoor space, but there is no solely outdoor space. So if you can imagine, it was probably an indoor event where people had doors open to the outside, but there is no solely outdoor space at the Marion Hotel. So.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Actually, funny enough, I've been in the apartments looking. Mm-hmm. So there's apartments looking out on Bagot Street there.
Yes,
and I've been in one of those apartments on the balcony, looking down into the courtyard, and there's no real place where you could put 50 people on tables there. I mean, maybe they've changed now, so you're right, it's an indoor outdoor, but I want to just tell people, like, Ireland's had one of the most draconian lockdowns in the world. Like, you weren't allowed to visit people in their houses. You weren't allowed to travel more than 3 kilometers. Now, the rules have relaxed, but there was like no indoor dining, maybe there was indoor dining, but there was you weren't allowed to have weddings. You weren't allowed to have funerals. You weren't allowed to have.
To be clear, we still have the most restrictive restrictions in the Western world. I mean, you're in California there. So, I mean, most of your listeners will be watching the baseball, for example, and they'll see crowds at the baseball. They'll see people at sporting events, music events. In Ireland to this day, there are no live music events permitted. There are no concerts. If you can't go to a sporting event, I mean, they've just announced that they will allow, on an experimental basis, the biggest sports stadium in the country to be 1/4 full for the next round of matches that are coming up. But even now, comparative to the rest of the world, we are dramatically more restrictive than, well, I won't say you guys in California are, but certainly what the mainstream in the US is at this stage.
But then it emerged that she had this party, this gathering. I mean, you were allowed to go in and have a meal, but they weren't allowed to book. You were never allowed to book multiple tables in a restaurant for your group. But she did it. 50 people. The Deputy Prime Minister was there. The great and the good, the progressive great and the good in Ireland, and not one of them thought, "Oh, this is a bit weird. This is a bit strange. We shouldn't really be doing this." So have they apologized, or what have they done now?
Oh, an extra note to that is that in the days preceding this, there had been some controversy in Ireland about Roman Catholic First Holy Communions and confirmations, which are religious events which are quite big in Ireland because we have a very large majority Catholic population, and they're considered milestones in kids' lives. And there were some bishops and priests who were advocating that we proceed with these, and the government said that to do so would be risking lives because we could have gatherings of up to 50 people. And that's a direct quote from the Minister for Health. He said it could be risking lives. And then it came out that they were doing the exact same thing themselves. And of course, at this event, shortly thereafter, it was then announced that Mrs. Ō'Pone would be appointed to a very cushy job at the United Nations.
Have the government figures resigned? Have they apologized? I mean, have they admitted they're doing wrong? I mean, surely it was illegal, or I believe they've done something rather clever that elites do.
Yes, well, they've had the Attorney General, who is the government's chief legal officer, come out and declare that while the event may have been in breach of government guidelines, it was not in breach of the law. So they are making a distinction between what the law actually says in black and white one can do, and what the government have been telling us all from the pulpit that you should do for the last couple of weeks. So their new line is that no laws were broken. But more than that, the government has now suddenly decided to relax and say, well, we'll forget about the guidelines. From now on, it is only what the law says. So Catherine Zappone, though she'll be no friend to you, Phelim, and certainly no friend to me, I was suggesting earlier on today that perhaps we should erect a statue to her, because inadvertently she seems to have freed the country. Because we are now all to be governed in order that no one has to resign. We are now all to be governed to the Catherine Zappone standard, which is that what she did is now legal nationwide.
Yeah.
Because if it wasn't, of course, then we would have to have ministerial resignations, which couldn't possibly happen.
No. I think Bernard McCaskey said when the Northern Ireland civil rights leader, she said, when we break the law, we go to jail. When they break the law, they change the law.
Yes. Yeah, that's a fair assumption of what's happened. Actually, I think it's, to be more nuanced, what they would say is, when you break the law, you go to jail. When we break the law, we clarify what the law means in a way that is advantageous to us. So it's been and I think the bigger picture for your listeners, Phelim, is that it's the same the world over. We have seen this again and again. I mean, in the UK, you had the situation where Dominic Cummings, the Prime Minister's chief advisor, decided during a lockdown that he was going to go drive across the country and visit his family when that was illegal for everybody else. Last summer here in Ireland, we had a situation where we had government ministers attend a golf society dinner when nobody else was allowed to have dinner. You've had the situation in California. Everywhere you have politicians imposing these laws, you have politicians breaking these laws. And it's really telling about human nature and also how people behave when they have power over others.
Yeah. I mean, Obama's wanted to have a birthday party for him. The Obamas went to John Lewis's funerals, traveled, people went to Biden's inauguration. The public health people said the BLM marches were not super spreader events. In fact, were good for the health of the nation. So it's good to know that people are just the same all over the world, really.
We've had the same thing here with the media, by the way, and marches. We've had marches for Black Lives Matter. We've had marches for Palestinian rights in opposition to Israel. Media has covered them all until a couple of weeks ago. There was a march against, I think it was vaccine passports. And the headline in the Irish Examiner the next day was that they should be ashamed of risking people's health by attending a protest. I mean, so it's the same double standard applied as it is in the US as it is here. It's
yeah. Well, that's
in Ireland we have a saying: it's the same excrement in a different bucket.
Yeah. On that note, I think we should. That's a great way to end that interview, John. Thank you very much for coming along. Where can people find you? Gript.ie and where else?
Grip.ie. That's Gript. And then I'm at John_McGuirk on Twitter if they want to find me and follow me there.
And that's McGuirk, Guirk.
Guirk, yeah.
Yeah. So Grip.ie and John_McGuirk on Twitter. John's doing a great job on great journalism in Ireland. So please follow him and keep up to date with the wonderful world of progressivism. Thank you.
Thanks, Phelim, and my regards to Ann.
Thanks. Bye. There you go. I mean, as I say, it's so similar to Nancy Pelosi getting her hair done when with no mask, when everyone else when the hair salons were closed. It's like the French Laundry. It's like you're not allowed to have public gatherings, but this isn't. It's like the public health people who said the Black Lives Matter protests are not super spreader events, and in fact are necessary for public health. They don't like you. They want to tell you what to do. And you're a fool for doing it if you do. So I just want to finish the show today with a story about dishwashers. Dishwashers are a very important part of any recipe, as you well know. And some people, of course, are very lucky, like Magda here, who has never used a dishwasher in about 10 years. She married well. She has a husband who shops and cooks and puts the stuff. Maybe she puts it in the dishwasher. Maybe she will deign to put it in the dishwasher. But have you noticed dishwashers are taking an awful long time to wash the dishes? 3 hours. That's not an accident. That is by government design. The Obama White House and to a certain extent the Bush White House bought the greenhouse gas emissions hoax and said, oh, we have to save energy, we have to save water, you can't be wasteful, you can't overheat too quickly. So your dishwasher, as opposed to taking an hour, is going to take 3 hours. Your shower head is going to have low pressure. So you're not going to have there's nothing in my mind. One of the first things I remember coming to America was power showers. We didn't have those in Europe. And there's mom and apple pie, white picket fences and power showers. To me, those are American. And, well, let's be honest, light beer, which is an awful abomination. And one of the few things about America that should never be exported and should be banned. Light beer, what's wrong with you people? But power showers and efficient dishwashers. So Trump overturned those regulations and said people should have good dishwashers. You should be able to put your dishwasher on at the start of a cooking session, and it'll be ready by the time you're finished. 1 hour, that's normal. 3 hours. So, but Biden's come in and now has brought in an executive order. They're going to overturn it to save the planet. So your life is going to be more. If ever there was, the perfect illustration of the progressive project, make your life more miserable for the greater good. But you see, the elites, they don't notice because they don't fill their dishwasher. Their maids fill their dishwashers. Their servants fill their dishwashers, and they've got plenty of cutlery. They've got plenty of silverware. They've got everything. They've got double and triple everything. So they don't need to be waiting on that. So they make your life more miserable, like when they close the restaurants and Gavin Newsom goes to the French Laundry, but they close the hair salons, but Nancy still gets her blow dry. So that's what they do, and this is why you need to fight this at every step of the way. So this is what they have ahead for us: more misery, less flights, less dishwashers, less efficiency, less. The progressives are against progress. That's what you have to remember. And that is the way of the world we're in, folks. Let's end this now and see you next week. Thanks. Bye.